This setup is a space and flight simulator cockpit that has been built by me. And now it's time to take it to the next level. In this video I will be building a 180-degree curved screen to be used with 2 projectors and set everything up according to these plans that I have made before. So, as it's usually the case with my build projects, let's start from the basement. To create a curved screen you are going to need a curve. I bet you didn't see that one coming. And while I know some people have done this with just kind of drawing the curve on the MDF and using a jigsaw, I don't trust myself with this thing enough. And I decided that I'm going to make this one easy for me. It will be a bit more expensive, but I basically had the curved CNC'd. This is a curve with basically 5 centimeters width, and the radius from the inside is 130 centimeters, so that will be the curve of my screen. And this is 9mm MDF. This alone would not be enough, but basically when I contacted the company, they said that it really doesn't matter if they're going to do one or the maximum amount of they would get out of one sheet, which was 9. So in this case I picked up this 9mm MDF, which was considerably cheaper than any thicker material, got the nine of these curves and glued 2 of those together. So basically I had the 4 curves that I need for the project and one just extra for just in case. So it was just basically gluing 2 pieces together, first just applying plenty of glue and then using basically all the clamps that I had and applying them into the place. Lots of clamps. You could basically say it was all clamps on the deck situation. As that, I stand behind that joke. Once the glue had dried, I had to find the center for the arches. So I decided to build this simple jig. And after that, it was just basically assembling the frame. And then it was time for the more challenging part of the build. So for the projection surface I decided to use this 3mm MDF, and the small challenge was that the local lumber store that I normally use didn't actually have this available, so I ended up ordering it a bit farther away, and it was a company that basically made it to measure, so I had to pay a bit more for it than I would have if I would have found a piece somewhere closer and got it myself. I was a bit worried that how this would actually work, but to my surprise the 3mm MDF actually bends quite well, so basically gravity did the most of the work here. And I just had to place it carefully in its place and make sure the frame was also straight, and then again a lot of clamps. And in this case it was so many clamps I actually had to use also the longer ones. And while the glue for the second screen was drying, I decided that it would be a nice place to make the legs for these. Nothing special, really simple legs, but I decided to add this threads in it so I could actually use a bolt to attach it to the screen. And for the paint for this, just black spray paint, because I just happened to have it available. Once the glue had dried, I was able to put these 2 pieces together, and then it really hit me how big this is going to be, just how amazing. Okay, I have taken the whole build process as far as I can in the basement, so now it's time to empty this room, and that's easier said than done. And now I have this serious issue on my hand that I don't actually know what I'm going to do with these Star Wars posters, because I just simply don't have any room for them here with my cockpit anymore. And at some part of the process I resorted using child labor. Not sure if he was that much of a use, but he got a chance to take a few screws out. Okay, this feels empty, but the room is now cleared, So next step, I'm going to start measuring the places for the curved screen, and after I'm done, I'll just start tracking stuff here and finish everything. After bolting the legs in place, the challenge was that how I was going to actually turn this around the right side. And that was not too easy task to do alone, but I think I managed to do it quite well. And at the start of this clip, actually you saw the foam that I added behind these sheets. Just some extra acoustic stuff, probably not that useful, but hopefully just a bit. After bolting these things together, I moved them to the right place based on the markers that I had on the floor. And yes, I did screw them on the floor. This is basically the cheapest laminate floor I was able to find, and my approach is that it's kind of a throwaway floor, so if someday I want to do something else with the room, I can just install another floor instead of this. Okay, a small issue that I wasn't expecting here. This is basically leaning backwards because, well, mostly because of the shape and everything, so I guess in this case this side is easier to fix. I can't say I like this solution too much, but it does the job and I can live with it until I perhaps come up with something better. After everything was in place, I also added some filler, which was a mistake as you're going to see later, but then it was time to start painting. First I ended up applying 2 layers of just white base coat that's meant to basically seal all the MDF. And a small lessons learned here, I started painting up and down as I would do with the wall. But since this is curved, it actually ended up leaving quite nasty streaks on the sides of the roller, so I realized that I actually had to paint this sideways. Then I mixed this projection surface paint, this kind of sort of open project called Black Widow, that is meant to be a cheap substitute for the more expensive projection surface paints, and I'm going to have a link in the description if you're interested in this. Okay, now that the first coat of paint is drying, and I think I'm going to add 2 more today, but I can start working with the projectors, and this is naturally the most expensive part of this build. Firstly, because the room isn't too tall, so there's kind of would be the risk that my head would be blocking the light that's coming here, so I need to use really short draw projectors. And second thing is that with the games like Star Citizen where you have a lot of text and stuff like that, you want to see the details. I think the full HD might not be optimal, at least based on one person's recommendations that I've talked with. So the full HD resolution wouldn't be optimal, so 4K ultra short draw projector is even the cheapest ones. not cheap. The thing is that this doesn't have a zoom, so I just need to kind of find out the best place where it covers the whole screen and overlaps in the middle. It doesn't have to be down to the millimeter accuracy because then I'm going to warp the image, but it needs to cover the whole image. Okay, so after some work it's done. It's not perfect. I think the overlap could be slightly smaller, but in the long term, if I want to make some tweaks, I think I'll need to make some sort of rails to the ceiling because, as I mentioned, these projectors don't have a zoom, so I cannot change the size of the picture. But for now it's good enough, so there's still a couple of layers of paints for me to do, and tomorrow I can hopefully start setting these up so I can have the whole image corrected. Also, funny small thing, I actually had to add small spacer here because way the lenses are on these projectors, they're not in the middle, so the image was partially projected to another projector here, so just had to take it 1 centimeter lower and move it 1 centimeter further, and it was good. And while the paint was drying, I spent some time adding the wires, so this is not the most elegant solution possible here, but it gets the job done, so that's good enough for me for now. New and hopefully the last day in the build project. So I have the screen painted, I have the projector set up, And also my wife helped to carry the most difficult bits in here yesterday evening, so now I'll just need to carry the rest of the cockpit here and set everything up. And there's quite a lot of work, especially with the wiring, so let's see how everything goes. The cockpit is pretty much in place, and I actually added casters underneath here so I can move it back and forth for easy access, which is quite a handy feature now that it will be close to the screen area here. And next up, it's the cabling, and there's a lot of stuff to do, like USB cables. I actually have total 4 or 5 USB hubs in the setup. I don't need that many ports, but it's kind of useful. But I want to make the cabling somewhat tidy, so there's going to be some work to do. And then there's the power. There's a lot of things that draws a lot of power, but I'm actually have a lucky thing here is that I have kind of 2 different power kind of circuits going around here, 2 different fuses. So I can plug some stuff over there behind the screen and plug some stuff to the corner here. So they're basically behind different fuses, so just trying to distribute the power load a bit here. And the moment of truth, and luckily everything worked on the first try here. And one last thing, since this cockpit is on casters, I need to make sure it stays in place. Especially I'm worried if I would push the cabinet sideways and break them out. So basically just drilling more holes to the floor. And at some point I'm also adding a steel plate to reinforce the hole. Well, after a lot of work, the build phase is basically ready. The cockpit is assembled, everything is in place. So now comes the interesting part. I need to warp the image of the projectors to the curved screen. And to do this I'm using a software called Immersive Display Pro. And mind you, I'm using the trial version for now because it's bloody expensive software, and I'm going to buy it when I manage to fix everything, so there will be in some occasions a trial text on the screen. But what I'm actually going to do here, and I'm not going into the details, if you want to kind of really guide how to do it, I'm going to link a couple of good videos in the description. But basically what I'm telling the software is that I'm going to mark a couple of known spots to the screen, and then I'm going to tell the software that where they actually are exactly. And once I have done this and given kind of the rest of the specs to the software, then it can actually calculate that how it should warp the image from the projectors, and everything should look like it's supposed to look like. This is something I haven't done before, so it's really interesting to see what's going to happen. To continue tweaking, so that everything, especially in the middle, will be accurate, because that's the most important part. So the edge blending will be really nice when it comes to that. It's ready. Naturally there's always something to tweak. I'm not happy with the edge between the 2 panels here. Might need to redo that one, and might actually paint it with darker colors someday. I'm missing my touchscreen here because I had to make some tweaks, last minute tweaks here, and I still don't have track IR working, but it's basically complete. I did make some small tweaks here at last minute, like a modified table display stand to be a ceiling display stand. I actually made the mounting points for the mouse and keyboard stand much better, much sturdier with the 3D printed versions. And the biggest thing, I actually lowered the dashboard display for example like 55mm, because it was just too high for my setup at the moment. But in any case, I actually haven't had yet time to try it with DCS. I had some issues with the Lua files, but I got a chance to play Star Citizen, and well, it's basically still my main game and what got me into the cockpit building. And what I can say about my experience, well, to be frank, it was bloody amazing. I mean, really. Okay, so I understand this might not be for everyone. You might prefer VR, you might want the better image quality of actual big screens, but for me this is perfect. Well, it could be always a bit bigger, but with 3 projectors, but for now it's perfect. And how much the project cost? Well, if I don't answer it now, half of the questions will be in the comments at how much it cost. And before I go into those details, just kind of want to say one thing. Well, I naturally don't think that I'm responsible for anybody except for my family about how I use my money. I know what sort of comments I'll be getting, so just want to mention one thing here. That is that it was expensive project for me. And I actually wouldn't have started this project if I didn't have a monetized YouTube channel. This YouTube thing, it's a hobby for me. It's really nice to see people are interested in the stuff I'm building, but at the same time I hope it can actually generate some revenue to fund the crazy stuff I want to build with my setup. So that's the kind of the point. I would have actually preferred a sponsor for this whole project, but I wasn't able to get anything, and at the same time Starfield launch was closing, so I decided that okay, I'm going to take a plunge. I'm going to build this stuff now and just hope for the best. Perhaps I'll get some sponsors when they see it. This is actually interesting to people. But the point here is that while I'm not expecting to get all the revenue back right away, I'm still hoping that the stuff I do for YouTube, the monetization stuff, ads and perhaps sponsorships will generate some revenue, and I will get significant part of the cost back someday. And the costs, well, like I mentioned, it was really expensive project. Total cost was 4,000 euros. And the main culprit was naturally the projectors. This is quite low ceiling in this room, so I had to get 4K short of projectors, and those things are not cheap. So the projectors were 1.4K each, so that was already 2,800 euros. Then the license for Immersive Display Pro was, if I got the ultimate version with the USB dongle, that was 550 euros about. Then some smaller stuff like the CNC routing, that was 280 euros, and I'm actually quite happy spending that money because it made the whole process easier. Then the NDF I have here, I actually didn't find 3mm MDF near me, so I had to order it, and it was already made to measure, so that cost something like 160 euros, and then the paints and some small stuff, so about 4,000 euros. It's a lot, I know. But the setup is ready, and I'll be trying different games with it in the coming weeks. I think I'm going to start with Starfield because the hype is quite strong, and then the rest of the stuff starts with DCS, Flight Simulator and other games occasionally too. And I have a lot of build projects in my mind also, so if you're interested in that sort of stuff, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.